Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your man's conscious effort so you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today's topic is, what is a ridiculously happy wife, and how do you become one? Instead of an interview, today I'm sharing the recording from a live Empowered Wife session from my paid programs, where we focus on practicing a specific skill and students share how they're applying the skill in their unique situation. And we workshop it together to get her the best, fastest improvement in her relationship. This Empowered Wife session that I'm sharing with you today is on how to RSVP not attending when you're invited to an argument. I've broken it into two parts. Part one, you'll hear today, and part two will be on next week's podcast. The Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award is on hiatus for the next 2 weeks, and then it will be back to recognize a truly dreadful recommendation. But first, let's talk about what it means to be a ridiculously happy wife, which is also the name of our group coaching membership. I know that one of the things that feels nearly impossible to do when you're really struggling in your marriage and feeling like it's hopeless is to make yourself happy. When you're so depleted and hurt from the things he's said to you or the way he's treated you for so long, hearing me talk about being ridiculously happy might feel like me talking about jumping from the ground onto the top of a skyscraper. It may just feel like it's not even realistic. And even if it seems like it might be possible to make yourself happy, it might seem like it's not going to improve your marriage because he's still going to be hurting you and fighting with you and tearing you down. And most human beings won't even start trying to do anything that feels doomed from the start. And that's logical because what's the point if you think you're just going to feel bad again? So it's hard to get started, even just to experiment, unless you feel seen and heard and understood. And you wouldn't be so down if you felt those things from your husband. And when you're not getting those essential nutrients that everyone needs to thrive, it's pretty hard to just pick yourself up and get happy. And yet, in my experience, being happy is an indispensable first step to making your marriage last, to making it feel relaxed and fun again. So it's a conundrum. You're unhappy because your marriage is struggling, but your struggling marriage makes it hard to get yourself happy. And until you get happy, your marriage will struggle, in my experience. Unless you have a group, a tribe, a coffee clutch that not only sees, hears, and understands you, but also does all of that without judging you. So you can be authentic. This is something I stumbled on early on in my own marriage journey with a support group of women in my living room. It took me over 10 years to create programs on our campus that provide a safe community of like-minded women where you can share really authentically and there's no judgment. A community of women who are supportive and equally committed to creating a lasting marriage and passionate about having a great relationship because they believe that marriage is important, because it is. And what we saw was that the community, in turn, provided inspiration and connection and accelerated the transformation because women who were struggling with making themselves happy found strength to finally take action. Connecting with like-minded women has been key to success for so many, including me, because it turns out the group itself fills a hierarchical need that I never knew I had. It provides essential interactions, even now that my marriage feels easy and sweet. Being part of the community on our campus gives me one of the critical pieces that I need to show up as my best self in my marriage, which is how I became a ridiculously happy wife. First, I got happy. And then my husband started piling on to make me even happier. And he's never stopped. And it's not just me. Tens of thousands of students report the same thing. They say they didn't know how much they needed the community until they got into it. And not just anyone can be a part of it. Our community thrives because we share certain values. So We want to make sure that you're one of us before you join. That's why you can't just go to the website and sign up without being qualified. If you're going to mail bash, well, you can't be in our community because we're focusing on what we want, not what we don't want. If you don't support marriage, this is not going to be the place for you because we are determined that having a lasting marriage is essential. And maybe you've got the tiniest shred of hope for your marriage, and sometimes you forget where you put that tiny shred. Well, that's okay. You can still be part of us. That's one of the reasons we stick together, is to remind ourselves that there is always hope. Joining our programs is a way of declaring you have hope, even if you don't always feel hopeful. It's hard to explain in words how fortifying it is to be part of this tribe. It's something you just have to experience for yourself, which is why I wanted to share this Empowered Wife session with you to give you a taste. All of the women on this audio recording knew beforehand that this session was being recorded, so I could share it here on the podcast. And they generously and authentically shared, just as they always do. Here's a taste of what it's like to be part of a community of women who are invested in being ridiculously happy wives. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. Well, as usual, I'm like maybe unreasonably happy to see you and just to get to spend this time together. I'm always so grateful to you being on this journey with me. I'm just, I get so much out of it. Sometimes I think, I hope I'm giving as much as I'm getting out of getting to be with you. And this helps me be my best self so I can have my best marriage. And it's just very nourishing to be with women who are so accountable, so committed, so courageous. So you continue to inspire me with your commitment to fixing your family, for your strength and your persistence, your devotion. So I get excited for this session every single time because you are my people. So, and today we're talking about how to RSVP not attending when you get invited to an argument or a fight. We're going to talk about the very specific actions you can take. We're going to make game plans for it. And another way to say this is how to resist bait when your husband throws it out and really seems to be inviting you to step into the boxing ring, right? Or do that old unpleasant dance with him that you've probably been doing for years and you want to stop. And I want to just go through some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing right now if you're unwittingly accepting those invitations to fight with him. So first of all, you might be feeling beat up and depleted from all the conflict. Or you might feel like you can't even have a conversation without it turning into a fight. Or maybe you have the same fights again and again. Or maybe you don't have that much conflict at your house, but you are exhausted from walking on eggshells, trying to prevent those conflicts from starting. And it still feels tense, even though the fighting is minimal. So we're going to just workshop some ways to sidestep those situations, keep your dignity, and get what you want while you're keeping the peace. And as always, this is going to be interactive, and I'm going to invite you to write down your challenges and your game plan and share your unique situation if you're willing so that we can fine tune it. And as always, we're recording this session. So if you missed it, if you have to leave early, you can watch it later in your portal if you want to review it. But I'm also doing something special this month only with the recording, which is I'm going to be sharing the entire audio portion only of this Empowered Wife session on the Empowered Wife podcast. So as always, we'll be sticking to using first names only on this call. And you can also use a different name today if you like for extra privacy. So, I mean, and you sharing on this call today, it's really a big contribution to ending world divorce. It is every time that you come on and share, um, because we all rely on that, right? We all get so much from hearing other women's stories and relating them. We can map them onto ourselves. But today, even more than usual, you're making a big contribution to ending world divorce because well, it's kind of hard to explain the magic of being part of this group. And I've tried to explain it, and words alone just don't do it justice. So your sharing is not only serving the other women here in the group, but it's also helping us give the podcast listeners a taste of this experience we have when we're together. So I appreciate your contributions. Now, in the bad old days, I didn't really need an invitation to a fight from my husband because I used to start a lot of them myself. So let's just be honest. I would just freak out about something, and I would get on his case, and I would pick a fight because I wanted to because I was afraid, and I was just acting on my fear, and so that was the source of a lot of the conflict in our house. I'd be like, I don't think you have a plan, and just kind of dig and dig until he defended or exploded or said something kind of horrible right back to me. I'm internally grateful that I learned how to stop picking fights. But even once I stopped doing that, it was still very frustrating that I felt like my husband was still inviting me back into the ring to go a few rounds. So that seemed pretty unfair. It was really frustrating that he would throw out bait to start an argument. And a big part of learning to use my power to create a peaceful home for me was just having a game plan to go to. I think we all have our knee-jerk reactions that we don't even feel like we're choosing it. I could get sucked into a fight so fast, and at the end, it felt like, well, that just happened. I didn't even have time to think about it or respond. I just reacted. But of course, in those moments, I was snapping back or contradicting or rolling my eyeballs out of my head. And it just made things more volatile and hostile. So maybe you can relate to that. So the first thing I want to do is invite you to think about the conflicts that come up at your house again and again. So what are the typical fight topics, right? I think we all have our greatest hits that play over and over. So I'm going to invite you to write down 3 of those that whenever they come up, they start to feel like fights. Now, so my early training in relationships was the oldest of 4 kids. So I had these like 3 minions, and they would ask me questions, and I figured I knew a lot more than they did. I was the smarty pants of the kids. So I got in the habit of answering those questions, and I started doing it with a lot of authority too, and telling them what to do, right? Like, now we're going to play capture the flags. You go over there, or whatever. So my husband is number 4 of 5 kids. He's the youngest boy, and he had the opposite training. He was asking the older people questions, and I think even to this day, it's like part of his personality to ask questions instead of making statements. And it's something I love about him. He's got a really nice humility, which I didn't even used to value at all. I'm like, why would someone want to be humble? I don't understand. But I think he kind of just leaves room for other people to contribute by asking questions instead of having all the answers, right? Like, are we going to do this? Or, do you think blah, blah, blah? So that's just part of his style of how he talks. So this used to be kind of a trigger for me though, because we'd be like maybe laying in bed at night, and we'd hear a noise, and he would say, "What was that?" And then I thought it was my responsibility to figure it out what it was and tell him. And I'd just be so mad because I felt like I have to be the parent, and he just gets to ask these lazy questions. And then I have to say, "Oh, I think that's an animal on the roof," or, I think that's the ice maker, or whatever. I'd have to, solve it. And so it just made me feel like the only adult in the family. Like, he gets to ask questions, and I've got to have the answers. So I'd get really upset about that. And finally, one day, I thought, you know what? Yeah, I don't have to have all these answers. And so he would say, "What's that noise?" And I'd go, "Yeah, what's that noise?" Like, I'd have a question too. And then he'd go, I'm going to go check it out, right? He'd get out of bed and go look. So he was happy to be a grown up and be our protector. But I just wasn't really giving him that opportunity. But I didn't need to be upset about it. But a lot of times previous I was. It felt like an invitation to a fight, or at least, it would trigger my resentment. Or another way that this would show up with us was we'd be making plans for the day, and I'd say, and we, discuss it. And we'd say, okay, first we're going to go to my dad's, and we're going to drop off the stuff, and then we're going to do this errand or whatever. And then, so we'd figure it all out. And then at the end, he'd go like, okay, so are we going to drop off the stuff at your dad's first? And I'd be like, we just talked about this. You don't even know the plan. It's like, you're not even paying attention. Like, clearly I'm the only person here that is being responsible. And it really wasn't that at all. That's just his style. He just kind of talks in questions. So when now I can just go, oh yeah, I would love that. Let's do that. He's like, okay, that's what we're doing. But those felt like bait to me. They felt like invitations to a fight. And you may be dealing with bait that feels much scarier and bigger, like some of these examples I'm giving. Maybe feel like that doesn't compare. Like maybe he's baiting you by being with another woman, or maybe he says he's going to file divorce, or he has filed, or he is very distant and removed. Those are really heartbreaking situations, and I get that it can feel much scarier to resist bait when you have those kinds of challenges. But one thing that I just absolutely love about the intimacy skills is that they work no matter how big and scary the illusion is, no matter how ingrained those reactions are, we always get a choice about how we're going to respond. So, and other common invitations that you might receive to an argument are a verbal punch, right? He may say something really mean and offensive. He might insult you. He might criticize you. Or maybe he complains and you feel like you've got to fix it, right? He's letting you know he's unhappy, and it makes you feel like there's something that you need to do about it. Or maybe he's sarcastic, or he raises his voice. Maybe that triggers some fight or flight in you, right? So we're going to dive deep into answering the question, how do you want to respond when you get baited instead of reacting? Or if you hear an insult or a threat or a complaint or yelling, even when it seems like he's being a big jerk, how do you want to respond? Because as you know, your response can make a big difference in the culture of your home, right? So, all right, let's talk about some potential responses besides biting the bait and getting into a fight. So I'm going to invite you to write these down, and we're going to circle back and kind of connect them up with the three common situations that you have arguments about, that you have fights about at your house. So number one way to RSVP not attending when you get invited to an argument is to hear his heart message. So it's really changing your part of the script. And my meeting with my coaches last week, and one of the coaches was talking about how she really hated bait. When she learned about her, that this certain things her husband was saying, she considered those bait. She thought, when is it ever going to stop so I can not have to deal with this all the time? And it seemed like her husband was baiting her constantly by criticizing her parenting and her work habits and more. So she was feeling really hurt and very defensive. And whenever he would do it, of course, she would defend herself, and then there would be a fight. But she didn't see another way to respond because he started it, right, by criticizing her. He was starting it. So, but with the help of her coach, she also realized that this hurt, defensive reaction she was having was familiar to her from even before she was married. And it actually had very little to do with her husband. She had this insight that she had a habit of making his comments all about her and then getting offended. Like that was her routine. She ran a little malware program in her head, and her husband just happened to be there. And sometimes he could trigger that malware. So when her husband said, for example, he said that he thought their son was overdressed. And so she heard a criticism of her as a mother, and she got offended. And she also saw, though, that she had a choice about how to respond to this. So she started listening to his comments in a new way.
She started listening for the heart message. Like, what's the positive spin on what sounds like it's just a criticism here? So then one day her husband had been drinking, and he was talking about how unhealthy it was that she sat for work all day long. And her first reaction was to hear it as a criticism and bite the bait by defending herself, that she was actually very healthy and she moved around a lot. So she started going down that old dirt road. And then her husband said, I know you're thinking, who cares what you think? You're drunk. But she stopped herself and she asked herself how she could take his comment besides being offended. And it occurred to her that he was thinking about her health and wanting the best for her, which she decided was because he loves her. So she said, no, I wasn't thinking, who cares what you think? I was thinking, gosh, you really care about my health because I'm so important to you. I'm so dear to you. And you love me and you want the best for me. And her husband went right there with her. And he said, that's right. You're very dear to me. And I do want the best for you. And I do love you. And it was this very tender moment between them instead of a big familiar fight. And she says now their house is much more peaceful. And she no longer thinks, when is he going to stop baiting me? But she sees it actually as a test before you enter the next level. You know, the way you take a test in school to go to the next grade, each time she's able to resist the bait, she tells herself, I'm creating more intimacy. And that's exactly what she's experiencing more of. So that's one example of listening for the heart message instead of reacting. So another way that you could RSVP not attending to an invitation for an argument is to choose your gratitude. You can choose your gratitude. So this is especially effective when the bait is a complaint. And another one of the coaches was talking about how her husband was complaining that she was a big spender and she was spending all his money. And she was so defensive about this because she said, frugality is like a core value for me. And she said, and he's the one that's getting Amazon deliveries to the house almost every day. So she wanted to correct him. She wanted to just pull out the receipts, pull out the credit card statements and prove to him who the real big spender was, right? But she decided to flip it instead. She decided to just hear it as an awkward plea for appreciation, which is pretty hard to do. It's a little bit like the heart message, right? Kind of hearing a positive spin on it. So she decided to say to him, you know, you're such a good provider and you're so generous with us. And also, you're such a good shopper. She threw all that in. And she was so happy. She said, she started doing that. And then he bought all the Christmas presents that year. And she's just let that go and recognized that this complaint about her being a big spender was bait. Or if he says it now, she said, she's like not even aware that he says it. She doesn't hang on to it. It doesn't sound like a pricker, right? It doesn't sound hurtful to her anymore. And because I was asking her, well, does he still say that? And she says, I don't think he does it much, but she wasn't even really sure if he did or not because it doesn't catch her up anymore. And they have a lot more peace at their house as well. And another one of the coaches was talking about how she was actually feeling really triggered by her husband's pressure on her to work. She had wanted to quit her job. She had a part-time job that was pretty flexible, and she could put in as many hours as she wanted. She didn't really have a set minimum, but up to a certain amount that she could do. So her husband so she said, oh, I want to quit my job. And her husband said, no, we need that income. And so she was very resentful about this. And then to make things worse, he would come into her office sometimes and say, how many hours have you worked this week? And she would tell him, and he'd say, well, you could have worked this many more hours. Like you're not reaching your potential. And so she'd get upset about this, right? And she would defend and say, well, the kids did this or that or whatever. And they would get into a fight. And she was really kind of attached to this idea, like, well, he needs to bring in the money and this is not acceptable for him. And that was the thinking that was going on behind her reaction. So he'd come in and just kind of start this fight. He would bait her. So she started thinking about her job and deciding, she was thinking about how you can't be resentful and grateful at the same time. And she realized like she was resentful about having this job. So she started thinking about the things that she appreciated about it, like that it was so flexible and that she didn't have to work a certain number of hours. And that it was part-time and that it provided her this money that she was able to spend however she wanted, or she could contribute to the family if she wanted. And she really kind of got on her own paper about this job. And she started to feel really grateful that she had this job. And then the next time her husband came into her office and said, "How many hours have you worked?" And she told him. And he said, "Well, that's only 80% of the hours that you could have worked." And she goes, "Yep." And she was just calm and peaceful about it herself. And so as a result, there was no fight. He just said what he said. And then he left. And I guess he's done it a few times. And it's just a conversation. It's not loaded anymore. Nobody explodes. So another way to avoid bait, RSVP, not attending to the argument, is to just find that gratitude, really make a conscious effort to employ the discipline of focusing on what you have and what you're grateful for instead of what you don't have, what you're not grateful for, right? So number 3 is to be the goddess of fun and light. Like just take a playful response to that bait. And one of the coaches was talking about how her husband was sitting with his brother and they were looking at a dating site on the phone. And the brother-in-law was saying, "What do you think of this one? What do you think of that one?" And she was sitting right there. She could hear the whole thing. And her husband said, "Well, let me see the phone here. Let me choose one for me. I'm going to look for one." And so she started to feel that old familiar feeling of like, I can't believe he would do this, and she wanted to say to him, we're married. Why are you looking at single women who want to date? But instead, she decided to just be playful. She said her self-care was high that day. She was really full. And so she just said to him, she said, "Oh," she's like, let me pick out one for you too." And he just looked at her and then he just burst into laughter. And then he kissed her and he said, "I have the one I want right here next to me." And she just felt so cherished and adored. So, and I guess his parents were there in the room too. So she kind of felt like some extra pressure in this situation. She was a little embarrassed, but she was able to choose that playful reaction. And she said now their relationship is so much more playful. There is so much more joking, and he loves when she jokes with him. So it was really, just really had a very positive effect on the culture at their home. So another response is just to be silly or just to be playful, right? And number 4 is listening, maybe using an "I hear you," maybe just whatever you think. So not taking on the burden that might be presented too, right? Like I interviewed a student named Kathy recently for the podcast she was ready to give up on her 36-year marriage because she believed that her husband loved someone else and he didn't love her. And she and her husband are farmers. And whenever they would move the animals together, she said it always turned into a huge, ugly, horrible fight that left them not speaking for days. It would start a Cold War. And he would say what he thought they should do to move the animals. And then she would say what she thought they should do. And then it just turned into a huge shouting match. And she just dreaded that chore. And then with the help of her coach, she realized it wasn't worth it to her to tell her husband how she thought they should move the animals. So she decided to experiment with this approach of just, whatever you think and just kind of going along. So the next time they were going to herd those animals around, she just listened to what he thought. And she just said, okay. She let him take the lead with it. And a funny thing happened. There was no yelling, none at all. He didn't even raise his voice. They got the animals herded peacefully for the first time in years. And the atmosphere in her house stayed light and it stayed calm instead of tense and distant. And that seemed like a miracle to her because they just had all those years of having drama and tension, and now they just didn't. And all she had to do was not offer her opinion, right? Just not take on the burden of how to move these animals. She just did a whatever you think and followed along. And this man is now he sends her these really sweet videos that he makes for her with romantic songs that move him that he wants to share with her. And she's feeling really loved and she's fixed her whole family. So RSVPing, not attending to that routine was a huge shift in her marriage. She felt like she had a superpower. All right. Number 5 way of responding, not attending to an argument is receiving. One of the coaches was talking about her husband sometimes will make a big purchase and she doesn't even know about it. And, he doesn't check with her first. And she kind of, gets a little upset about that. And she found out that he had gotten season tickets for their local baseball league, which was pretty expensive. And she felt like they didn't really have the money. And it was like Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, and Sunday evening. So it was going to take a lot of time. And she thought, oh, you're so busy and you haven't finished all these projects around the house that, because you never have time to do those because you're so busy. And she didn't really feel like going to those baseball games, but she did miss the first baseball game, I guess. But he went with a friend. And then but the second night she went and he had picked special seats where she didn't have to go up and down the stairs because she has trouble with stairs. And it was near the restroom, so she didn't have to go that far to the restrooms. And he brought her some food that he knew she would like. So she just received, and she said it was so relaxing. She said he didn't even look at his phone the whole time. He was just talking to her. And she could see he was really pleased with this whole thing. Because she recalled too, like this had been one of their very first dates they ever went on. They went to this stadium and they did a vow renewal in that stadium a few years after they had been married too. So instead of focusing on how it was too expensive and it was going to take too much time, she just enjoyed herself. And surprise, surprise, he found the time to finish tiling the backsplash in the kitchen that she'd been wanting him to do for the last 4 years. She finally got the backsplash, even though she thought there wasn't going to be enough time if they went to all these baseball games. So anytime a home improvement project gets done after 4 years of not getting done, I consider that a miracle. And she also came to realize that him buying these tickets was actually a romantic gesture on his part. So she just received graciously and there was no conflict whatsoever. All right, so now I want to invite you to just look at your list of common fights that happen at your house. Love to see 3 of those. And I want you to think about which of these 5 approaches might you like to experiment with in your relationship. Will it be listening for the heart message instead of getting offended? Would it be choosing your gratitude? Could it be being a playful goddess of fun and light? Might it be saying whatever you think, just listening? Or would it be receiving? Which one you want to pick to experiment with and make some tries to implement? Now, and sometimes I will say, I figure out what I want to do the next time, and then the next time comes and it goes, kind of like a freeway exit I just missed, right? I see it in the rearview mirror, like, oh, that's when I could have used one of those strategies there, right? But that's okay, because that really is progress towards implementing the next time. So just being aware, like, oh, I could have decided to be grateful when he was complaining, right? So I would love to hear, if you're willing, what are your ongoing fights about and which of these actions you want to practice so you can preserve your dignity and the intimacy and peace at your house. So who wants to go first? I saw Mary's hand up first. Hey, Mary.
Hi.
Hi.
So my conflict, I only have one, very peaceful home here. It's about finances. And I did have coaching last week about it. So what happens is every few months, my husband claims that I use the bank card excessively. So last week I defended myself. I mean, up until now, I've been defending myself. That it's not true. I always, and he doesn't want me to check with him before I use the bank card. So basically he does trust me, but he does come with this. He does claim that I use it too much. when I'm not supposed to be. So from the 5 things, I thought about listening to his heart message, which I did come up during the coaching that I had, because the last time, it happened last week actually, I didn't listen to him. I just defended myself. So I didn't listen to his heart message. But when I went back and thought about it, I thought maybe he wants to be more involved in my spending plan, because when I relinquished control of the finances, he didn't want to see my spending plan. But now I feel like he probably feels safer. At the time when he didn't want to see my spending plan, he probably was scared, because he thought if he's going to comment on something, I would probably blow up. But now I'm much more receptive of what he says. So I think he feels safer to be involved. So he's starting to, instead of telling me outright, can we go through the spending plan together? He's throwing the bait.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was planning in the next few days to tell him, to show him gratitude, to tell him, you always take such good care of me, and you always make and I have an SFP. You always make sure that I do everything, that I have everything I need, and I would love to have my spending plan approved by you. So
beautiful, Mary. Well, congratulations. Sounds like you. They started out saying you have a very peaceful home, except for this topic, and I hear how much more emotional safety there is now than there used to be. So I know that takes a lot of courage, and that you have been resisting the bait. It sounds like, and not. I mean, you said something about he was afraid. He might have been afraid that you would blow up, and now he's not. So it sounds like
well, last week when he told me that I've, using the bank card for, when I shouldn't be, I did. I took the bait. I didn't even think, like, it was just automatic. And I did, like you said, the comment that, you said one of the coaches that, I made the comment about me. It was all about me. And really, it looks like he doesn't want me to check with him every time I use the bank card. So
right. Well, and I love that you would turn to gratitude too, right? And just say, you always make sure I have everything I need. And that I thought that was a very, very smart spouse fulfilling prophecy that you came up with. And I also hear your desire for him to be aware of the spending plan in advance. And he's kind of said, no, I don't want to do that.
I did feel rejected when he didn't want to see my spending plan.
Okay. Okay. And so, and then
I knew the reason behind everything. I was a little bit relieved because I was scared. It was, there was fear there. But now, and I did feel that he's like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with you. So just, keep the spending plan, do whatever you fancy. But although I would like to implement being go-full about it as well, but I just can't think of how I would do it.
Oh,
to be,
well,
add the fun there.
I liked what I heard you saying about that he does trust you, right? That might have also been part of the heart message that, oh no, I don't need to see your spending plan. I trust you, Mary.
Yeah, he doesn't say that he trusts me, because he does tell me you use it excessively. But I know that deep down he does, because otherwise he would tell me that I shouldn't check with him every time.
That's right. That's very true. This is a good example of actions speaking louder than words.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so what would you get that you don't have now if he did review your spending plan?
Vulnerability, because I'm showing him my plan, and I'm opening myself up to his criticism or advice, which is a bit scary to me, because I know that I can't have things my way. But on the other hand, I know that when he comes and gives me what I need or what I want from his paycheck or whatever, it's going to make me feel much more special than if I provide it for myself.
You're such a brave girl. I love that. So I hear your heart message is, look, I want this intimacy with you. I'm a little scared to show you this because, and the fear is that he might criticize some of your spending, you're saying? Is that why it feels vulnerable? Yeah.
Maybe criticize or maybe cut some things out.
Yes.
And I might have to do with some things without some things that I've been having till now. And have to like wait for him to provide it for me rather than just give it to myself.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying, so that is scary, right? I mean, this is right on my biggest bait button I ever had to was the financial stuff. And so it's scary, like, oh my gosh, I might have to go without something that I want. And I also hear you trusting him and having this spouse fulfilling prophecy that he always makes sure you have what you need. And
and I believe in that 100%.
Yeah. And it sounds like you'd rather have the intimacy than you'd rather risk this conversation, it sounds like, or maybe even having to cut back or something than to forego the intimacy that could come from being vulnerable and really having financial intimacy with him. It sounds like.
Yeah. I'm taking it as if I'll be rewarded for it if I do it in the right way.
Yeah. That in
the end.
Yeah, that's certainly my experience as well. And it's a big difference, right, between blowing up like you've done in the past, it sounds like I've done in the past, and bringing this level of vulnerability. It's like night and day. Mm-hmm. So I'm impressed. I think it sounds like a great plan. Yeah, I just love that you're bringing, there's several skills at work there, right? SFPs and gratitude, and vulnerability. And listening for his heart message. So really good.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on first and sharing. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So Dakota's here too. Hey, Dakota. Love to hear yours.
Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for having me and calling on me. It's an honor to be talking to you today. The one that I decided to go with is my husband's control/jealousy. I went with this one because it's the one that I seem to be having the hardest time with. And I've been trying to listen for the heart message in this one. It's really, for me, it feels quite extreme because it could be just something as simple as just me having a very light conversation with the neighbor who happens to be a male. I really don't know anything about this person. But if my husband sees this or really anything, he will kind of he'll take like jabs at me, like he will try to get in the way of my self-care, or he will, or he'll say, very hurtful things and become very critical and, just really hurtful. And, I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, because I'm trying to I don't want him to do these hurtful things. And, so I do listen for the heart message. And I think the heart message is, that he's afraid of losing me and that he wants me all for himself. And, and those things do feel good. And at the same time, I want more. I want to be able to feel a sense of just freedom and just being myself and just being normal. So that's my challenge.
Yeah. You want to feel trusted, and this sounds pretty painful to not be able to feel like you can have a conversation with the neighbor without creating a situation that's going to feel like punishment later. Sounds like, that does sound stressful. So, all right. So which of these, did anything resonate as something that you could use as a game plan?
I guess, like I said, I've been trying to listen for the heart message, and I would like for there to be a way that I can use gratitude, because gratitude works really well with him in so many other ways. I can't think of a way to do it in this situation.
Yeah, I get it. So, and I think if I just listen to your desire, Dakota, it is to be trusted. Like it
Hmm.
just, it sounds like you're not doing anything wrong, and you just
Right.
want, and so, and it sounds like your instinct is the heart message and gratitude, which I really like. And I guess I'm wondering if the gratitude might take the form of a spouse fulfilling prophecy. Like, I
Yeah.
know that you trust me, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that
I think I have kind of tried to like play around a little bit with that one too. I was maybe just trying to think of how to fit that into conversations or sentences in a way that made sense. Because I would like to use that.
yeah. Yeah. Sometimes this stuff is the hardest to reach for when you need it the most, right?
Yes.
So I love this example you brought of talking to the neighbor. It sounds like that resulted in a fight. Is that right? Or
Yeah, something like that. Well, it actually we were just getting ready to go to the museum, and I was standing outside waiting for him to finish getting ready. And so I happened to be talking to the neighbor while I was waiting for him. He comes outside and sees this, and we get in the car. He's very upset about it. And instead of going to the museum, he stops somewhere to go shopping. He knows I don't like shopping. He actually loves shopping, and decides that we're going to just go and do that instead, and just didn't do what I wanted to do.
there
So
wasn't a verbal fight. There was this.
in the past there would have been, but I deliberately didn't fight it.
Oh, yay.
I duct taped. I was pretty upset, but throughout, the next couple of hours, I tried to find things to do or time, tried to find ways to appreciate the time, that that we were having. We did end up going to the
Wow.
museum later, but we only spent like an hour there, and I felt like I had to rush through it, and that's something I had wanted to do for a long time. So I was grateful for that we finally got to go. I would have liked to have been able to spend more time there. So it did not result in a fight. I was just frustrated that I didn't get to
Yeah.
have the
Oh,
time I
yes.
wanted.
Sounds incredibly frustrating. Kind of suffocating is kind of the feeling I have a little bit. Like
Yes.
driving
Yes.
and you're like a prisoner in the car and you're going to shop instead of
Yes.
going where, you were hoping to go.
Right.
So I so admire, good for you for keeping the duct tape on and you didn't do the same old dance that you've done.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's not the full Monty either, right? This is not where we want to be. You don't want to be stuck here. We want to get to we feel less like you were just kidnapped and taken shopping. It sounds like I can really appreciate how yeah, that must take an enormous patience. So you're a patient woman. So what about using the SFP? I mean, first of all, let's wordsmith the spouse fulfilling prophecy for just a second, because I offered some words, but I like them to be your words.
Okay.
So what is it you would like to experience from him in that moment? Let's say in the car.
Understanding. Oh, yeah. I guess I would like to experience understanding from him,
Okay.
acceptance,
Acceptance. Okay.
mhm,
Okay.
and trust. Really, I guess that is truly what it is, and truly
Yeah.
trust. So those things.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe the SFP would be something like you're so accepting and understanding and trusting. Or
Okay.
that's a big mouthful. So maybe we'd parse it down just a little bit. Of those three, which one feels like the biggest headline?
Um, the one that feels the most out there, the furthest stretch, is probably accepting. And then the one that feels the most comfortable is understanding, and trusting is somewhere in between.
Okay. And the one you most want to experience? What about that?
I guess, the one I most want to experience is trust, I think. But really, I feel that accepting and understanding are like involved in that. They kind of fall under trust. So,
Yeah.
so maybe just understanding, because I don't expect him to think the same way that I do, but I would like him to just understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe understanding, I guess, is a good one.
So if we just replay this, I feel like I have a little movie clip of you in the yard talking to the neighbor and then getting in the car and going to the store. So at some point in there, how would it have been for you to say, I just appreciate how understanding you are. Thanks for being so understanding. Or you're such an understanding person.
Okay.
Husband, something like that.
Okay. I definitely would like to do that. And I'm thinking, so as soon as we got in the car, the very first thing he said is, I don't understand why you have to tell him everything, or why you want to talk to him or something, and he'll just start criticizing the neighbor. He'll start criticizing him. And so I do want to say something like that about how, you're so understanding. And I'm wondering how to fit that into when he's got the complaint, how to fit that right into that complaint of his. Would it be odd if I just directly followed up with, "You're so understanding"? Because I think he might kind of go, "What?"
You know what? That is why spouse fulfilling prophecies can feel so weird sometimes, right? They can feel dumb. You're like, you just said the opposite thing. Do you have any evidence that your husband is understanding?
I do. There have been a few conversations that we have had throughout our marriage, our 3-year marriage, that he does kind of come around, or he does start to understand why I feel a certain way. Usually he's very walls up and just, I don't understand why you think the way you think. But there have been a few conversations where he has come around. So I guess, I do have a tiny bit of evidence, but it feels like it's been a really long time.
Okay.
Since we've had one of those conversations.
How about in other areas besides this one? Is he understanding?
I'm sure there probably are, and maybe I just can't think of them right now. I'm kind of stumped.
I hear you. Okay, well, I get that. It sounds like the it just feels like a really big challenge, and I totally get that, Dakota. So, and I can appreciate there doesn't feel like there's any evidence at the ready. And this just happened with the museum trip?
This happened within the last week or two.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So,
I will say that I do have evidence that he's trusting. He doesn't do things like go through my phone or go through my things or, go looking for pain. He doesn't shop for, things that I'm doing wrong or anything like that. So I feel I do have evidence that he's trusting.
Okay. I like that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what about maybe that would be where you'd start with that SFP?
Okay.
How would that be for you?
I would like to do that. And I have actually, because I share my gratitude list with him every day that I make for him. I do 3 things a day for him.
Fantastic.
And I've recently, thank you. I've recently started dropping an SFP in there, here and there. And one of them was, he trusts me, which is great. And, maybe that had an effect. Maybe it didn't. He always loves it on his phone. So now I want to try to verbalize that. I want to try to bring that in as much as I can and water that. So I wonder, I don't know, how weird would it be if he's complaining and, going on about my conversation with the neighbor. And then I said something like, I'm like, "You're so trusting, would that feel, I just wonder, would he go, what are you doing? Or that's weird. Why would you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could. So one of the things I love about the spouse fulfilling prophecy, first of all, you can experiment, right? So you're trying it on. We'll see how he responds. My experience has been that usually people love when you're shining a light on their positive qualities. They don't really want to argue with it. But if he did, what I heard is that you have some evidence. You're not the kind of person to put a tracker or check my phone or anything like that. You trust me. So you can, it's, I heard some authenticity in it for you. So I think the concern I hear you having, which I think is really normal, is what if he thinks I'm being manipulative or I'm lying, right? And what I hear from you is, I've got some evidence of this. This is the truth that I want to focus on. This is the thing I want more of.
What if I said something like, it's not like you to be so untrusting, or it's not like you to, I don't know, something in that department, or
you could, you definitely could. I learned that format from Lee Miltier, and I thought she was a genius for coming up with it. But I have my own experience is I prefer my SFPs to be in the positive, like the thing that I want to be experiencing, instead of, because sometimes I think our brains just hear the negative. We say it's not like you to not be trusting. So I guess trusting is there. You could.
What if I said, you're usually so trusting of me?
That's fantastic. That's it.
Okay.
Ding, 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 ding. I mean, I love that one, right? Because it really feels like it's what you want to be experiencing.
Okay.
Yeah. How does that feel?
Because in digital format, he's very trusting of me. And that takes up a lot of our lives nowadays. So I have to say,
it does.
Yeah.
Okay. So good.
Okay.
And as always, the gratitude skill, which is where spouse fulfilling prophecies fall, is always about counting our blessings, right? And it changes our hearts as well. And so it kind of feels like we're trying to change him, and we're trying to have a different experience, bring out his best. But I'll be interested to hear how it changes your experience yourself, Dakota, because that's I hear a huge commitment to your gratitude list already. And I'm always so excited about that, because I just think it's the most powerful intimacy skill of all. And you're doing a great job employing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'll be following along. I want to hear how that goes.
I'll update the Facebook group.
It's a courageous thing to do. So I always admire that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, I'll share part 2 of the Empowered Wife session on how to RSVP not attending when you're invited to an argument. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that we had just moved into our temporary home when I jumped up from my patio lounge chair to get the crackers inside, and I walked very forcefully into the sliding screen door.